Blood roared in Mabel's ears. The blade quivered in the wooden table like a trapped bird. Around her, 40 souls held their breath. The chapel creaked under their silence. She had pulled that knife from her wedding dress, slammed it down hard enough to make the preacher jump backward. Now she faced a choice that would carve her future deeper than any blade could cut pine. "I ain't no horse to be traded," she said. Her voice shook like thunder rolling across dry plains. "I will not be bartered like cattle." 3 weeks earlier, the debt collectors had come to her father's shack. They spoke in numbers and deadlines while Quinn sweated whiskey through his torn shirt. Mabel heard every word from behind the thin door. Her father owed Warren DeWitt more money than a poor man could scrape together in 5 lifetimes. The solution came wrapped in a marriage contract. 1 daughter for 1 clear debt. Simple as branding cattle. Now the sun blazed through the chapel windows. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that cut across weathered faces. Ranch hands shifted their boots on creaking floorboards. Women fanned themselves with torn hymnals. Everyone waited to see if the girl would break or bend. Warren DeWitt stood at the altar like a mountain that had learned to wear a coat. At 42, he owned more land than most men could ride across in a week. His cattle fed 3 counties. His water rights kept Dry Creek alive when other towns withered and died. But he did not look like a king claiming his prize. He looked like a man carrying ghosts in his chest. The preacher's Bible trembled in his hands. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. He had married hundreds of couples in this chapel. None had ever drawn steel during the ceremony. "Let her speak," Warren said. His voice cut through the tension clean as an axe through dry wood. Mabel's father lurched forward. Red climbed his neck like spilled wine. "You little," Warren raised one hand. Not threatening, just firm. "Let her speak." The chapel fell silent as a graveyard at midnight. Even the wind outside seemed to pause and listen. Mabel stared at the man who had bought her freedom with a marriage contract. He could have demanded obedience, could have reminded everyone about the debt, could have turned this moment into her humiliation. Instead, he waited. "I do not want you to be my wife because you owe me," Warren said. Each word fell clear and measured as drops of water in a drought. "I want you to stay because you choose to." Something cracked inside Mabel's chest, not breaking, opening, like ice giving way to spring water. She had expected chains. Instead, she found a door she could walk through or away from. Her hand loosened on the knife handle. The blade stopped quivering. The preacher cleared his throat. His voice wavered as he resumed the ceremony. But something had changed in that chapel. The words carried different weight now. When Mabel spoke her vows, she spoke them with her chin raised. When Warren slipped the ring onto her finger, it felt like a key turning in a lock she had always held. By sundown, they were husband and wife. By morning, the whole county was talking about the woman who drew steel at her own wedding and the man who let her keep it. The DeWitt ranch house sat like a fortress against time itself. Built from limestone and cedar, it had weathered 20 years of drought and storms. Inside, silence ruled heavier than any tempest that ever crossed the Texas plains. Mabel had locked her bedroom door the moment they arrived. She spoke to Warren only when necessary. Sharp words thrown at the floor like broken glass. She broke a vase the first night, slammed doors hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. Still, Warren said nothing. He gave her the space a wild horse needs before it learns to trust. Every morning she woke to find a book resting against her door. Jane Eyre first, then The Awakening, then Little Women. All stories about women who fought for their voices in a world that never asked what they wanted. She kicked them aside at first, but by the 4th morning, she paused. The book was about a pioneer woman. A note was tucked into the first page in careful handwriting. You do not have to like me, but I hope you keep reading. WD. She read 10 pages before sundown. At night, she heard him walk past her door. Floorboards creaked once, twice, then fell still. She listened as he made coffee at dawn, as he cleaned his boots in the mudroom, as he murmured quietly to his horse in the barn. He never tried her door handle, never raised his voice, never demanded anything. He simply existed, like the ranch itself, stoic, weathered, vast. On the 6th night, prairie wind howled through the walls. Mabel could not sleep. She pulled her blanket tighter, but her mind raced like a Mustang with a burr under its saddle. Then she heard something soft and low, the unmistakable sound of a guitar. She crept down the hallway barefoot. Her fingers brushed log walls for balance. The living room glowed with firelight. Warren sat in a chair by the hearth, a weathered guitar in his lap. He did not see her. His eyes were half closed, face soft with something that looked almost gentle. The melody was melancholy, but strangely tender. It spoke of old wounds and new hope, of something broken that still held together. Mabel froze in the shadows. The man who had bought her freedom was playing music, like a boy in love with moonlight. The tune rose like wind through canyon walls, then stopped abrupt. Warren exhaled as if returning from somewhere far away. She retreated before he noticed her, heart hammering against her ribs. She had not known Warren DeWitt could make music, had not known men like him could bleed in silence. That night, she opened the book and read until morning. 3 days later, Warren found her on the front steps, coffee growing cold in her hands. The morning sky hung low and silver, full of secrets not yet spoken. I am riding out to check the creek line, he said. His voice was steady as stone foundations. You are welcome to come if you like. Part of her wanted to refuse out of habit. But another part, quieter now since the night she heard him play guitar, leaned forward like a flower toward sunlight. I will need a gentler horse than that red devil of yours, she said. Warren's lips twitched at the corners. Barely. Saddles already waiting. They rode in silence for the first stretch. Only the soft clop of hooves and occasional rustle of jackrabbits through sagebrush. The air smelled of dry grass and river wind. It stirred something Mabel had nearly forgotten. Freedom. Warren led her through a narrow pass up a sloping hill. At the top, the land opened wide. From there she could see miles in every direction. Burnt orange ridges, scattered oaks, the blue shimmer of distant water. But what caught her attention was the split in the trail ahead. 2 roads, one bent left, curling through hills back toward the ranch. The other veered right, vanishing into open plains. Warren stopped his horse at the fork and dismounted. He brushed dust from his hat, spoke without turning around. That road on the left will take you back home. It is familiar, quiet, mine. He pointed right. That one leads straight to Dry Creek. You can reach the station by sundown if you ride hard. Mabel frowned. Why are you telling me this? Because I meant what I said. I do not want you to stay because your father owed me. I want you to stay if it is something you choose. Her horse shifted beneath her. She looked between the 2 paths, then at Warren standing with his back turned, shoulders squared, facing away from her decision. You brought me all the way out here just to let me go. I did. I will not follow. Whichever way you turn, you ride it alone. The wind picked up. Her heart thudded like hoofbeats on hard ground. True freedom was right there. The open horizon beckoned wild and wide as any dream she had ever dared. But then she looked at the man standing still, a man who had offered her silence instead of shouting, space instead of chains, books instead of threats. A man who had waited without question for her to decide. Slowly, purposefully, Mabel turned her horse toward the left path. Warren heard the hooves shifting. He turned just enough to meet her eyes. She said nothing. He said nothing back. But something passed between them like morning light breaking through storm clouds. They rode back in silence, but the space between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a beginning. And Mabel Quinn realized she had just made the first free choice of her entire life. The letter came folded twice, edges smudged with dirt and desperate fingerprints. Slipped under Mabel's door before dawn by a boy too frightened to knock. When she opened it, her hands trembled like leaves in a windstorm. Papa's drinking again. Says he's going to give Liza to that horse trader from El Paso. Says the man will pay 2 barrels of whiskey and a mare. Please, Belle, do something. Sadie, Mabel dropped the letter. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Liza, her little sister, only 14. Still a child who picked wildflowers and hummed while washing dishes. She did not put on shoes, did not brush her hair. She ran barefoot through the hallway, down the stairs, burst into barn where Warren was feeding horses. "Warren!" she gasped. He turned quickly, startled by her face. White as fresh linen, lips trembling like aspen leaves. "He's selling her," she whispered, clutching the letter. "He's giving Liza away for 2 barrels and a damn horse." Warren's jaw tensed, his hand still on the feed bucket. "Your father?" She nodded, breath catching in her throat. "Please, I know you do not owe me anything, but I cannot let him do this. Cannot let her live what we... She choked on the words. Warren stepped forward slowly, not touching her, just standing close enough that she could feel his steadiness. "Do you believe that I would ever harm you?" he asked quietly. She looked up, eyes wet and raw. "I do not know how to believe that. Not anymore." Warren looked away for a moment, then reached for his coat. "Saddle up." They rode hard toward Dry Creek. Dust clouds rose behind them like smoke signals. By midday they reached the town. Streets buzzed with heat, and voices spreading news like wildfire. Quinn was trading his youngest girl for liquor and a broken-down mare. Townspeople gawked as Mabel and Warren strode up the main road. Her father stood outside the saloon, laughing with the horse trader, a heavy man with stained teeth and a cigar clenched between yellowed fingers. Mabel leaped off her horse. "You will not touch her," she shouted. "She is a child." Her father turned, blinking in alcoholic surprise. Well, look what the wind blew back. She is not yours to sell. I fed her, clothed her, raised her. I can do what I please with what's mine." Warren dismounted and stepped between them. The crowd began to gather, men leaning against posts, women peering from porches, children hiding behind their mothers' skirts. "Liza's not livestock," Warren said. His voice carried the weight of thunder before rain. "She is a girl, a sister, and she will not be bartered." Quinn sneered. "And what are you then? A savior? Do not forget, you paid for her sister with land and cattle." Mabel froze. The crowd murmured, but Warren did not flinch. "I bought a chance for her to choose," he said, voice steady as bedrock. "And I waited for her to choose me. That is the difference." Long silence fell over the street. Someone in the crowd muttered, "That's true, Miss Mabel." She looked at all the faces, sun-weathered and work-worn. She had never been more exposed in her life. "And yet, yes," she said, voice steady as creek water over stones. "He gave me what no one else ever did, a way out and the right to say no." The horse trader stepped back, muttering about not wanting trouble, and slipped away down the road like a rattlesnake into tall grass. Quinn's face turned dangerous red. "You ungrateful little—" Warren stepped closer. You come near either of them again, he said, voice low and unshakable as granite foundations, and I will make sure there is not a soul left in this town who will deal with you. The crowd murmured agreement. No one stood with Quinn. Not anymore. He spat on the ground, then stumbled into the saloon. Mabel exhaled, knees weak as water. Warren turned to her. You all right? She nodded. Then, for the first time since their wedding, she reached out and touched his hand. Thank you, she whispered. Around them, Dry Creek began to see Warren DeWitt not as the man who bought a bride, but as the man who returned a girl her voice. The trail home stretched quiet through fading gold afternoon light. Horses moved slowly now, their pace unhurried, as if sensing the tension between their riders had changed like weather before rain. When they reached a bend overlooking a Dry Creek bed, Warren pulled his horse to a stop. The sun dipped lower, turning sky above them into a wash of rust and honey. We will rest here a moment, he said, voice rough from wind and weariness. He dismounted stiffly, boots hitting ground with sound of finality. Mabel found a flat stone and sat, fabric still warm from the sun. Warren stood nearby, hands resting on his belt, gaze fixed on distant line of trees marking someone else's land. I was not always this way, he said, voice low and guarded. Mabel looked at him but did not interrupt. I was married once. You should know that. Her head turned fully now. Her name was Clara. She was 16. I was 30. It was arranged. Two old men deciding what a union was worth. He paused, staring at something she could not see. She never said no, but she never smiled either. She painted birds everywhere. On the pantry door, window sills, side of the chicken coop even. She tried to bring life to that place. He gave a short, bitter laugh. I thought I was being good to her. Gave her land, clothes, security. But I never asked her what she wanted. Not once. Mabel felt her chest pull tight. One winter, I came home late from a supply run. Had snowed hard, quieting everything. Too quiet. I found her in the snow behind the barn. She had drunk a bottle of laudanum, still wearing the scarf I gave her for Christmas. His voice cracked like ice under weight. His eyes, when they finally lifted to meet hers, were no longer stone. They were shattered glass reflecting firelight. I buried her myself, dug the grave with my own hands. No preacher, no guests. I told myself I would never marry again, not unless the woman could walk in freely and walk out the same. He sat down heavily on a nearby log, shoulders slack, elbows resting on knees. I did not kill her, but I caged her with good intentions, and the cage did the rest. Mabel sat quietly, hands in her lap, heart aching like an old wound in winter weather. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small handkerchief, aged cotton with faded pink stitching in the corner. Her mother's, one of few things she had taken when she left home. Without a word, she rose, crossed the space between them, knelt beside him. She placed the handkerchief in his palm. Warren looked at it, then at her. He said nothing. Neither did she. They sat there as sky turned from gold to violet, and hush of dusk settled like a quilt around them. In that silence, something old and broken began quietly to heal. Spring came slow to Texas plains, but it came sure as sunrise. Frost gave way to soft earth. Winds that once screamed through valleys now hummed like lullabies. Green returned in cautious brushstrokes, buds on mesquite trees. Little weeds poking through cracks in dry stone. Promise of new life where land had known only dust. At the far edge of DeWitt Ranch, nestled between two hills, a small house stood with walls still smelling of fresh-cut wood and hope. Smaller than the main house but brighter, with wide windows and a wraparound porch. Mabel stood barefoot on the steps, holding rolled parchment under her arm. I still cannot believe you drew this, Warren said, hammer in hand. I cannot believe you built it exactly as I imagined, she replied. He chuckled softly. Was not much of a leap. You want a light space and a door that only opens from the inside. She smiled. Exactly. The floor plan had been hers. Every corner and beam, every window and cupboard. A place not given but created. A home not inherited but earned. That morning they planted a rose bush beneath the porch window. Its roots tangled with soil warmed by morning sun. Warren knelt, hands in dirt, while Mabel gently placed a small shrub into the hole. Pink blossoms curled at tips, still sleepy from cold. Why roses? He asked. They fight, she answered. They bloom in spite of thorns. He nodded, as if that explained everything. As they finished patting down soil, a rider came up the road with letter in hand. Mabel recognized the handwriting before she opened it. She read aloud on porch steps, voice catching in places. Dear Belle, the nuns say I can stay until I am grown. Then they will help me find a place to teach. I think I want to be like the women in your books. But most of all, I want to be like you. You showed me no one gets to write my story for me. Not Papa, not poverty, not fear. Only me. I love you. Liza. Tears welled in Mabel's eyes, but she smiled through them like sun through rain clouds. Later that week, Dry Creek gathered again at the little white chapel. This time wildflowers spilled through windows and songbirds danced in rafters. No contract this time. No debts owed. No whispers of scandal. Just laughter. Just joy. Just a man and woman walking side by side, hands linked, eyes steady. Mabel wore no veil, only a simple dress and sprig of rosemary in her hair. Warren wore the same black coat from before, but this time his face was not unreadable. It was full of light. When it came time for vows, she turned to Warren and held both his hands. I used to think I was just something passed between men, she said. A weight, a burden, a trade. She looked into his eyes. But then you stood still and waited. You let me choose. She took a breath. From this day on, I am no longer the girl who was given away. I am the woman who chose you. The chapel rose with applause like thunder rolling across open plains. Outside, under pale sky filled with songbirds and sunlight, they walked back to their new home together. In the soil, the rose bush began to bloom, and Mabel Quinn discovered that freedom was not a place you rode toward, but a choice you made every morning when you opened your eyes to greet the day.